The fallout growing from that interview with Prince Andrew, answering questions for the first time about his friendship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
Whispers echoed through Windsor Castle long before the public ever caught wind of the moment that would leave royal watchers stunned. Andrew, once accustomed to quiet corridors and controlled appearances, found himself at the center of an unfolding humiliation no one expected. Eyewitnesses say the tension in the room shifted instantly, as if centuries of royal decorum cracked in a single heartbeat. When his reaction surfaced, even insiders struggled to believe what they were seeing. So, what really happened inside Windsor Castle that left everyone speechless today? The day the castle stopped bowing. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor stepped through the ancient stone archway of Windsor Castle, expecting the familiar rhythm of respect he had known his entire life. For decades, the moment he appeared in a hallway, staff straightened their uniforms, lowered their heads, and addressed him with the title that once seemed permanently stitched to his identity, Your Royal Highness. It was a ritual he never questioned, a silent reminder of who he was and the power he carried. But on this visit, his first major return since losing his titles, the air carried a different weight, one that he could feel before a single word was spoken. The corridors felt colder, footsteps echoed longer, and instead of the usual bows, the staff remained upright, their expressions steady and unreadable. Guards who once snapped to attention now kept their eyes fixed ahead, refusing even the smallest acknowledgement. The palace employees, who had once rushed to accommodate him, now addressed him calmly, almost casually, using a name that struck him harder than he expected, Mr. Mountbatten Windsor. The tone was polite, but unmistakably firm, like a clerk calling forward the next customer at a government office. No grandeur, no exception, no space left for his old life to slip back in. According to reporting by Ephraim Hardcastle of the Daily Mail, what unfolded inside Windsor was far more than an awkward moment. It was a deliberate cultural shift, ordered from the very top. King Charles, determined to draw a clear line around the monarchy's future and its image, had sent an unspoken but absolute message to everyone inside the castle. Andrew was not to receive special treatment of any kind.
You can, on occasions, get extremely lonely and isolated.
Not in words, not in gestures, not even in the tiny courtesies that once followed him everywhere. The effect was immediate. Staff who had once stepped aside now walked past him without hesitation. Those who used to soften their voices around him now spoke with the same tone they used for any other visitor. And the workers who once looked flustered if they mispronounced a title seemed almost relieved to drop his entirely. For a man raised in a world where hierarchy dictated every breath, the shift was more than humiliating. It was disorienting. Yet what made the moment truly devastating was the realization that this wasn't temporary. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the new reality, carefully shaped by the king himself. A decision that said more than any public statement ever could. A decision that left courtiers whispering that Andrew's status had been reset to something he never imagined he would be: ordinary. But there was something else beneath the surface, something quietly spreading through the castle walls. Because while Charles intended this as a controlled, symbolic correction, the reaction it triggered inside Andrew was far from predictable. Witnesses later described a brief moment, subtle but unmistakable, when his composure cracked, just enough to reveal a flash of shock, anger, and something deeper, something he had spent months trying to hide. And that's where the real twist begins. Because what happened after that quiet moment didn't just expose how far he had fallen, it revealed a consequence the palace never expected, one that would soon ripple far beyond Windsor. But could Andrew's private unraveling inside Windsor trigger consequences even the palace never saw coming? And what shocking fallout lies just beyond these castle walls? Keep watching. When privilege stopped knocking at his door. If the cold greetings inside Windsor Castle rattled Andrew, what came next cut far deeper, because it targeted a part of his daily life he had always taken for granted: his meals. For years, Andrew enjoyed what palace insiders quietly referred to as a royal delivery service. It wasn't just convenient, it was a symbol of his status. Whenever he felt hungry, Windsor Castle's elite kitchens, staffed by chefs trained to cook for monarchs, diplomats, and world leaders, would prepare whatever he wanted and send it straight to Royal Lodge, hot, fresh, carefully packaged, and delivered without delay. It was a privilege he rarely thought about, because in his world, such privileges weren't optional, they were expected. But now, that door has closed. Staff have been given clear instructions. Nothing leaves the castle for Andrew, no breakfasts, no lunches, no handwritten notes from the kitchen offering his usual favorites. If he wants a meal, he has to figure it out himself, or rely on whatever Sarah Ferguson can pull together, while juggling her own messy, struggling business ventures. For a man who lived in a bubble where every detail of his life was anticipated by others, the removal of something as basic as prepared food was more than an inconvenience. It was a message. And it struck a nerve because to him, the food had always represented access, proof that he still belonged inside the system, that the institution still cared for him, that he could count on the machine of monarchy to cushion him, no matter how hard the outside world pressed in. Now that cushion is gone, and the silence where those daily deliveries used to be is louder than any public statement. But the real weight of this shift becomes clearer when you understand how Andrew treated the people who served him for decades. Stories spilled out: his sharp temper, his habit of barking orders without making eye contact, his refusal to say please or thank you, and his notorious impatience with anyone who moved a fraction slower than he demanded. One ex-staffer revealed that Andrew's signature command, shouted frequently, was simply, "Hurry up!" He expected clothes pressed instantly, flights arranged with no notice, and every request handled as if the world revolved around his timetable. He didn't just want service, he demanded submission. And if someone forgot to bow, hesitated before responding, or used the wrong form of address, he didn't correct them quietly. He glared. He lectured. For years, staff endured this behavior because the hierarchy was clear, the rules were rigid, and challenging a royal, especially one as forceful as Andrew, felt impossible. So imagine what it feels like for those same employees today. After decades of shrinking themselves, they can now stand tall in his presence. After years of avoiding eye contact, they can look him straight in the face. After being scolded for slipping up on titles, some even with a quiet sense of satisfaction. The new protocol didn't just strip Andrew of privilege, it gave the staff something they hadn't had in ages: freedom. And while the king may have intended this shift as a practical boundary, the emotional undercurrent within Windsor suggests something more complicated, because with each withheld meal, each neutral greeting, each unbent knee, Andrew isn't just losing privileges. He's being forced to face a truth he spent years ignoring. But the twist comes when one small, unexpected interaction, barely noticed by anyone at first, changes the tone of his entire visit and sends an unspoken warning through the palace walls. And what hidden force at Windsor is turning Andrew's humiliations into a silent warning? And how far will this unravel his carefully guarded world? Stay tuned. The symbols that slipped through his fingers. What most people fail to understand, and what Andrew refuses to see, is that royal power has never been held together by laws alone. It lives in symbols, in the subtle but unmistakable acts that separate the monarchy from everyone else. The lowered heads, the carefully spoken titles, the deliberate distance maintained in every room. Those gestures aren't small. They're the glue. Remove them, and the person standing there suddenly looks ordinary. And that is precisely why Andrew's unraveling feels so dramatic, because the removal of those symbols isn't just a protocol change. It's a dismantling of the identity he clung to for 6 decades. Since the death of Queen Elizabeth II, Andrew has been quietly but relentlessly trying to rebuild the ground beneath him. Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie could help negotiate some small return to public life. He hoped the fury surrounding his scandals would fade in the background as new stories captured the world's attention. To him, redemption still felt possible, or at least survival within the system did. But none of it happened. The door didn't just close, it was locked from the inside. Public outrage didn't disappear. Charles didn't shift. And the monarchy made its position painfully clear. Whatever Andrew once was, he is no longer. Yet Andrew can't accept any of it. He still walks, speaks, and reacts as if the institution owes him something. He still insists he did nothing wrong, even as global condemnation remains loud and unrelenting. He still expects to trigger sympathy, even when those closest to the palace say his own arrogance brought him here. And above all, he refuses to leave Royal Lodge, even though the monarchy has pushed repeatedly for him to step aside. To Andrew, giving up that home would mean acknowledging the truth, that his status, his influence, and his royal image have all been stripped away. That's why the refusal of Windsor staff to bow cuts so sharply. It's not just a breach of habit. It shakes the foundation of who he believes he is. When people stop performing the rituals that once defined him, the illusion of authority snaps. And for the first time in his life, he's forced to confront a version of himself he can't control. Inside palace circles, some say this moment marks a shift not just for Andrew, but for the monarchy itself. Whispers have grown louder that King Charles has finally found what many long believed he lacked: a decisive spine. One suggestion, repeated with surprising confidence among insiders, is that Charles made his toughest stance yet, a clear message that he does not want Andrew or Sarah Ferguson anywhere near his Christmas celebrations in Balmoral. It wasn't shouted, it wasn't dramatic, but it landed with the force of finality. And it's this silent firmness, this new royal boundary, that leaves Andrew standing outside the system he once dominated, trying to understand how quickly the symbols that built his world slipped through his fingers, and unaware that a new consequence is already forming, one he never imagined he'd face. So what shocking consequence now stalks Andrew outside Windsor's walls? And how far will his public humiliation spiral before anyone can stop it? Stay glued. The messages that shattered the last defense. Just when it seemed Andrew's humiliation at Windsor had reached its peak, a new wave of trouble emerged. Quietly at first, then with the force of a storm that no one in the palace could ignore. Fresh emails surfaced, private communications between Andrew and members of Jeffrey Epstein's inner circle, and their contents tore through the last scraps of the narrative he had tried so desperately to preserve. These weren't the polished, controlled statements he gave in public. These were raw, unfiltered, and revealing in ways that left even seasoned royal observers stunned. In these messages, Andrew wasn't the calm, rational figure who sat across from the BBC's Emily Maitlis, insisting he handled everything properly. He wasn't the collected man casually discussing alibis and dining at Pizza Express. The email showed something far different: a frantic, overwhelmed royal who could barely keep pace with a crisis spiraling beyond his reach. One line stood out above the rest, 5 words that sliced through every public claim he ever made: "I can't take any more of this." For a man who spent decades projecting control, certainty, and status, that single sentence revealed the truth he fought to hide. The tone of the emails made it even worse. Andrew wasn't offering explanations or clarifying details. He was pleading, begging for statements to be drafted in his defense.
I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat.
Insisting, sometimes repeatedly, that he knew nothing and was not involved. Demanding that his name be removed from anything that linked him to Epstein's growing scandals. He pushed, pressed, and panicked, trying to seal cracks in a dam that had already begun to burst. But the most damaging detail wasn't his desperation. It was the timeline. These emails proved Andrew was still in touch with Epstein's circle long after he publicly insisted he had cut ties. This was not a distant association or an unfortunate footnote from years earlier. It was active communication, coordinated responses, quiet crisis management, a hands-on strategy to contain fallout from a relationship he insisted was long since ended. His entire public defense, every calm answer, every measured phrase, collapsed instantly under the weight of those messages. The BBC interview that once looked awkward now looked misleading. His claims of barely knowing anyone connected to Epstein now rang hollow. Even the strange explanations about not sweating or recalling specific dates felt like pieces of a performance crafted to hold back a truth he knew was already slipping away. Until these emails surfaced, the palace could still try to soften his image, framing him as a royal who made foolish decisions but had long since stepped back. That framing is now impossible. The messages expose someone who wasn't stepping away at all, someone still deeply entangled, still strategizing, still asking for help from the very people he claimed were in his past. And the emotional tone, shaken, urgent, frightened, matters more than any detail. These emails didn't just show a man facing a scandal. They revealed a man who sensed the fall coming, felt the ground give way beneath him, and scrambled desperately to hold on to whatever remained of the world he once dominated. But the most shocking part is what the palace did next. The move that transformed these emails from a private embarrassment into a public turning point and pushed Andrew into a place even he never believed he would stand. But what if Andrew's deepest humiliations at Windsor were only the start? What hidden truths lie in the emails the palace feared most? Stay with us. The paper trail the palace couldn't bury. For years, the monarchy has done everything in its power to seal off the Andrew chapter, quietly, thoroughly, and with a determination that showed just how deeply they wanted the scandal to disappear. They stripped him of his titles. They cut away every official role. They erased his public appearances. They worked to remove him from the center of royal life, piece by piece, until all that remained was a man living in a vast house he refused to leave, clinging to an identity that no longer existed. Every lever they could pull, they pulled. Every door they could close, they closed. But what they could never control, and what they feared the most, was the trail left behind in writing. And now, that trail has surfaced. The newly uncovered emails don't just complicate Andrew's situation, they rip it wide open again. They return the spotlight to the very questions the palace had spent years trying to bury under silence and tradition. With every message exposed, old wounds tear open, bringing back the same doubts the monarchy hoped would fade. Who in the family knew the full truth? When did they know it? And most hauntingly, what else remains unseen? Inside the palace, the fear isn't just about what has already come out. It's about the possibility that more documents, more conversations, more desperate pleas could still be sitting in private inboxes, untouched and waiting. The monarchy thrives on order, on controlling what the world sees and how the narrative flows. But a paper trail has no loyalty. It tells its own story, one line at a time, whether anyone is ready for it or not.
We keep up a firm pace because there's so much to do, there are so many opportunities.
For Andrew, the fallout is immediate and cruel. His reputation, which was already in ruins, absorbs another blow so damaging that even his closest defenders can't find a way to spin it. Public sympathy was long gone, but now the general mood has hardened into something harsher. A refusal to believe anything he says, a collective exhaustion with every new revelation. What little patience the public once had evaporated long ago. But these emails turn irritation into open disgust. And inside royal circles, the reaction is even colder. Whatever fragments of tolerance remained for Andrew's presence, whatever lingering sense of duty or familial obligation some might have held, disintegrate instantly. He isn't seen as merely troublesome anymore. He is seen as a threat, a liability who brings risk simply by existing within the institution. A man whose name, when attached to new evidence, carries the power to undo years of damage control. Among the staff, there is no shock. They watched the slow downfall in real time. They saw the signs long before the public did. But among the senior royals, among the people who spent years trying to manage this crisis quietly, the disappointment runs deeper. The emails show not just scandal but choice, deliberate engagement, continued involvement, frantic attempts to cover tracks he once insisted he never left. And within this growing tension, a new fear begins to settle in the corridors of Windsor and Buckingham Palace. If these emails exist, what else is out there? What piece of evidence might appear next? Which line of communication could reveal a truth the monarchy cannot contain? It is this fear, quiet, heavy, and unspoken, that sets the stage for the next decision the palace is forced to make. A decision that reshapes Andrew's fate in a way even he never saw coming. What hidden consequences lie behind Andrew's public humiliations, and how far will the palace go to rewrite his fate? Stay tuned. The final door. The monarchy is ready to close. Inside the palace, the fear now sits heavy and unmistakable. If these emails manage to surface, what else is still buried in some forgotten inbox? Some archive no one has touched? Some digital corner waiting to explode into the public eye? That question keeps royal officials awake because they know the truth. Scandals don't end when the institution wants them to. They end when the last piece of evidence is uncovered. And right now, no one can guarantee that moment has arrived. King Charles, who once hoped to manage this crisis quietly, has finally shown just how firm his stance has become. He has made it brutally clear that there is no road back for Andrew. Not now, not later, not quietly, not publicly. Every attempt at rehabilitation, every whisper of a return to duties, every plea for reinstatement has been shut down with a consistency that leaves no room for interpretation. And now the palace's next move might be the most symbolic yet. Andrew is being relocated to a private cottage on the Sandringham estate, one of the most isolated and quiet royal properties in the entire country. It is far from Windsor, far from London, far from the pulse of royal life. Insiders are already calling it what the monarchy won't say out loud: internal exile, a place where Andrew can be contained, watched if necessary, but kept firmly away from the institution he once represented so confidently. The timing matters too. The move is expected to happen soon, likely after Christmas, after the family gathers, after the public appearances are made, after the king delivers his annual message. Only then, once the spotlight dims and the festive cameras retreat, will Andrew be sent to the far edges of the royal landscape.
Hug and public displays of affection are not something that I do.
This is where his story now stands. A former prince stripped of titles, roles, and privileges. A man who once demanded bows and instant obedience, now facing staff who stand tall, speak plainly, and feel no obligation to indulge the arrogance he carried for decades. A public reputation that has not just collapsed, but collapsed again, with each new message revealing the frantic, frightened man behind the calm facade he presented to the world. The emails, those raw, desperate messages he never imagined would be read by anyone beyond his small circle, have done more than damage his image. They have reshaped his entire legacy. For years, he insisted on innocence, insisting loudly that he was misunderstood, mistreated, misrepresented. But the texts show a different story. A man overwhelmed, cornered, begging for protection from a scandal he directly contributed to. This is the turning point the palace always feared. Not because it surprises them, but because it confirms everything they had been trying to quietly distance themselves from. Every denial, every explanation, every revision of events now carries far less weight. The question isn't whether Andrew will recover. He has already been stripped of titles, privileges, and public respect. What looms now is far more unsettling, a reality the monarchy has long tried to ignore. With each new revelation, each leaked email, and every public reminder of his desperate attempts to salvage his reputation, the palace is forced closer to a truth it cannot escape. This isn't just about one man's fall. It's about the fragile systems, hidden alliances, and secrets that may finally be exposed, threatening to reshape everything the royal family has carefully controlled for decades. And now, could Andrew's humiliations at Windsor signal a deeper collapse within the monarchy itself? Or is there an even darker truth still waiting to emerge? The silence that finally splits. Questions swirl around Andrew Mountbatten Windsor that no public statement can answer, and each new email only deepens the uncertainty. Do these messages change everything? Or was his reputation already shattered beyond repair? Public sympathy, once faint and fleeting, now feels like a distant memory. Yet even that memory is being eroded further with every revelation. The emails are not just proof of misjudgment. They are windows into a man frantically trying to salvage a world that was collapsing around him. A world he once assumed he could always control. What haunts the palace most is the possibility of more still hidden. If these messages exist, what else waits in private correspondence, in archives, in devices untouched by the public eye? The fear is not just for Andrew, but for the ripple effect these documents could unleash. potentially reaching far beyond a single former royal. Every uncovered line hints at a larger network of secrets, a shadowed story that the monarchy has worked tirelessly to contain. And, for Andrew, every exposure strips away not only dignity, but the illusion of safety, leaving him standing alone amid the ruins of carefully constructed privilege. Central to this story is the relationship with Sarah Ferguson, a bond that for decades provided both shelter and strategy. Their mutual silence acted as a shield, keeping potentially damaging truths away from the public, and in many ways it worked. Together, they navigated crises, managed appearances, and maintained a facade that suggested stability despite scandal. But now, that protection is crumbling. The mechanisms that once allowed them to survive scrutiny are failing. The emails, combined with ongoing scrutiny, reveal just how delicate that balance was and how dependent both Andrew and Sarah were on secrecy and discretion. As those walls fall, the structures that kept them insulated from both public judgment and royal discipline are exposed, fragile, and rapidly dissolving. For the monarchy, the implications are profound. It is no longer just a matter of managing one man's reputation. Every revelation challenges the system itself, forcing questions about loyalty, oversight, and accountability to surface. The palace's decades-long effort to control narrative and hierarchy suddenly collides with a reality that cannot be contained.
On that particular day that we now understand is the date.
Every staff member, every former aide, every record becomes a potential thread in a growing tapestry of exposure, threatening not just Andrew's place in history, but the broader perception of the institution. And in the middle of this, Andrew remains frozen between two worlds, the one he once commanded with confidence, and the new reality where every action is scrutinized, every word weighed, every secret at risk of being laid bare. The emails do more than damage a reputation. They puncture the illusion of control he has clung to for decades. The pressing question now isn't just what has already been revealed, but what still lies hidden, quietly waiting to emerge. These unseen truths could completely rewrite everything we thought we knew about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. His choices, his alliances, and the intricate network of secrecy that for decades protected him from public scrutiny, scandal, and the full weight of royal consequences. Each new revelation threatens to reshape his legacy in ways no one anticipated. So, what do you think? How deep does Andrew's fall really go? And could Windsor's humiliations be just the beginning? We'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.